close your eyes. Take a slow, deep breath. And let the world around you quietly fade away. Tonight we travel back, far back, to a time before highways and cities, before electricity and engines, before the noise of the modern world ever existed. We travel to a place that was once nothing more than a cluster of muddy hills, beside a slow, winding river. A place that would one day become the most powerful city on earth. We are going to Rome. But not the Rome of marble and monuments. Not the Rome of emperors and legions. Not yet. Tonight, we begin at the very beginning. When Rome was just a whisper on the wind. A dream not yet dreamed. A city not yet born. The year is approximately 753 BC. The Italian peninsula is a wild and beautiful land. Thick forests stretch endlessly across rolling hills. Rivers run cold and clear through valleys full of birdsong. The air smells of pine and earth and rain. Among these hills, 7 of them, rising gently above a bend in the Tiber River, small communities of people have begun to settle. They are simple people, farmers and shepherds. They keep goats and pigs. They grow wheat in small fields carved out of the hillsides. They do not know yet that they are standing on the ground where history will be made. They do not know that their little village will one day rule the world. But before we speak of cities and senators and soldiers, we must speak of a legend so old, so deeply woven into the heart of Roman identity, that every Roman child knew it by heart. Every Roman mother whispered it to her children at night. It is the story of 2 brothers and a wolf. Her name, in the old stories, was simply the she-wolf. She had no other name. She needed none. One morning, long ago, along the muddy banks of the Tiber River, she found something unusual. A basket. Small and woven from river reeds, it had come to rest gently against the roots of a fig tree at the water's edge. The wolf approached slowly, her golden eyes careful, her gray fur damp with morning mist. Inside the basket were 2 baby boys, twin brothers, abandoned, left to the mercy of the river and the wild. Their names, though the wolf did not know this, were Romulus and Remus. The legend says the wolf did not harm them. Instead, she nursed them, fed them, kept them warm through cold nights under the open sky, protected them with her own body from the dangers of the wild forest. Why? No one truly knows. In the old stories, it was simply the will of the gods. Rome was destined to be, and so the wolf played her small but sacred role in that destiny. A shepherd named Faustulus eventually found the twins. He brought them home. His wife, Acca Laurentia, raised them as her own sons. The boys grew strong and wild, quick-tempered, fearless, leaders among the other young men of the hills. And when they came of age, they decided to build a city. Remus chose the Aventine. They argued. Brothers often do. And in those ancient days, arguments between men of power were not settled with words alone. The old stories say that Remus mocked his brother, that he leaped over the low wall Romulus had begun to build, laughing, taunting him. And Romulus killed him. It is a dark beginning to a great story. But Rome never pretended to be innocent. From its very first day, the city was built on blood and ambition and the fierce desire to survive. Romulus named the city after himself, Roma. And on that day, April 21st, 753 BC, according to Roman tradition, the clock of Roman history began to tick. In those early years, Rome was nothing impressive. A few hundred people, perhaps. Rough wooden huts on a windy hilltop. A wooden palisade fence for defense. A small market by the river. Farmers, herders, craftsmen. But Romulus was ambitious. He needed people. More people. Rome could not grow without population. And so he did something remarkable. He declared his new city an asylum. A sanctuary. A place where anyone could come and start again. Runaway slaves came. Exiles came. Debtors fleeing creditors in other cities came. Criminals seeking a second chance. Wanderers with nowhere else to go. Rome took them all. No questions asked? It was, from its very birth, a city of second chances. A city that said, whoever you are, whatever you have done, you are welcome here. Start again. That openness, that hunger, would define Rome forever. But there was a problem. Rome had men. Many men. But very few women. And without women, there would be no families. No children. No future. Romulus tried asking the neighboring tribes, particularly the Sabines, if their women might marry Roman men. The Sabines refused. And so Romulus did what Romans would do again and again throughout their history when asking didn't work. He took. He invited the Sabines to a great festival. Music, dancing, food, wine. The Sabines came, men, women, and children together. And at a signal from Romulus, the Roman men seized the Sabine women and carried them away. It was a violent beginning to many marriages. But the old stories say, and perhaps this is the legend softening a brutal truth, that the Roman men were kind to the women they had taken. That many genuine marriages formed. That when the Sabine fathers and brothers came with swords to take their women back, the women themselves stepped between the armies. They had children now, on both sides. Roman husbands, Sabine fathers. And they refused to let those they loved kill each other. Peace was made. The Sabines and Romans merged into one people. And Rome grew a little stronger. After Romulus, Rome was ruled by kings. 7 kings in total, over nearly 2.5 centuries. Each one left his mark on the growing city. Numa Pompilius, the second king, was a man of peace and prayer. Where Romulus had built Rome with swords, Numa built it with temples and laws. He organized the Roman calendar. He created the priestly orders that would tend Rome's sacred fires for centuries. Under Numa, Rome paused, and breathed, and learned what it meant to be a civilization, not just a camp of warriors. The third king, Tullus Hostilius, was the opposite, fierce and warlike, always searching for battle, always expanding Rome's borders. Then came Ancus Marcius, who built Rome's first bridge across the Tiber. A simple wooden bridge, creaking and swaying in the river wind. But a bridge that connected Rome to the world beyond its hills, and made the city a crossroads of trade. The city grew slowly, steadily. New hills were incorporated. The valleys between them were drained. The great Cloaca Maxima sewer system begun, carrying away the marsh water and making the low ground between the hills livable. Streets appeared. Then forums, open public spaces where people gathered to trade, to argue, to hear the news of the day. Temples rose on the hilltops. Small at first, made of wood and terracotta, but growing grander with each generation. And always, more people came. Rome in those early centuries was like a fire that someone had just managed to light in wetwood. struggling, smoking, uncertain, but burning, always burning. The seventh and final king of Rome was a man named Tarquinius Superbus, Tarquin the Proud. Even his name tells you everything you need to know about him. He had seized the throne through murder, killing his own father-in-law, the previous king. He ruled through fear. He ignored the Senate, those elder advisors who expected to be consulted on matters of state. He made decisions alone, in the dark, without counsel. Rome endured him for a time. But Romans, even then, had a fierce and particular hatred of kings who forgot that power must be earned, not simply taken. The breaking point came in 509 BC. Tarquin's son committed a terrible crime against a noblewoman named Lucretia, a woman of great virtue and dignity. Lucretia told her father and husband what had happened. And then, refusing to live with the shame that had been forced upon her, she took her own life. Her kinsman, a man named Lucius Junius Brutus, held her body up before the people of Rome. And the people rose. Tarquin the Proud was driven from Rome. His family was expelled, their property seized. And the Roman people made a solemn vow, a vow so serious, so deeply felt, that it would shape Roman identity for the next 500 years. Never again would Rome be ruled by a king. The word king, rex in Latin, became almost a curse in Rome. A dirty word. An insult. Something to be spat on the ground. Rome would govern itself differently. Rome would have a republic. The republic. 2 consuls, elected each year, sharing power equally, each able to veto the other. A senate of elder statesmen to advise them. Assemblies of the people to vote on laws. It was imperfect. It was messy. It was slow. But it was theirs. And for the next 5 centuries, this republic, this grand, complicated, argumentative, passionate experiment in self-governance, would carry Rome from a small city on 7 hills to the master of the known world. But that is a story for the chapters ahead. For now, let the early city rest in the amber light of a setting Italian sun. Let the shepherds lead their flocks home across the Palatine Hill. Let the Tiber River murmur quietly in the valley below. Let Rome sleep. As we, too, begin to drift. Breathe slowly. Take a slow breath. Let your body sink deeper into comfort. The story continues. We have seen Rome born, from legend and river mud and the fierce ambition of one man. We have watched it grow slowly, painfully, beautifully, from wooden huts on a windy hilltop to a city of streets and temples and markets. And we have seen the kings fall, driven out by a people who refused to bow. Now, Rome must learn to govern itself. And so we entered the most powerful room in the ancient world. A room of marble and shadow and whispered ambition. The Senate. Close your eyes and imagine. You are standing in the Roman Forum, the heart of the city, the center of the world. Around you, the sounds of Rome rise and fall like a slow tide. Merchants calling out their wares, the clatter of cartwheels on stone, the distant splash of a fountain, the murmur of 1,000 voices going about their morning. The air smells of bread and smoke and pine resin and the faint sweetness of sacrificial incense drifting down from the temple of Jupiter on the Capitoline hill above. And there, at the edge of the forum, stands a building unlike any other. Not the tallest, not the most decorated, but the most powerful. The Curia, the Senate House. Its heavy bronze doors stand open in the morning light, as they always do when the Senate is in session. A signal to all of Rome that the men inside are speaking, that decisions are being made, that the machinery of the Republic is turning. The men entering those doors are called senators. Patres. Fathers. That is what Romans called them, the fathers of Rome. The elders. The wise men. In the early republic, there were perhaps 300 of them. Later, the number would grow to 600, then 900 under Julius Caesar. But in those early centuries, 300 men held the fate of the greatest city on earth in their hands. Who were they? They were Rome's aristocracy. Its oldest and most powerful families. Men who could trace their bloodlines back generations, to the founding clans of the city, to the companions of Romulus himself. They wore their status on their bodies. Their togas, the great draped garment of Roman civic life, were brilliant white, edged with a broad stripe of deep purple. The latus clavis, the wide stripe. A mark that said to anyone who saw it on the streets of Rome, I am a senator. I am one of the fathers. Step aside. Inside the curia, the air was cool and still. The chamber was rectangular, longer than it was wide. Along both walls ran low marble benches, rising in shallow tiers like a theater. This was where the senators sat, on either side, facing each other across the open floor. There were no assigned seats, exactly. Senators sat where they chose. But over time, convention developed. The most senior men, the former consuls, the consulars, sat nearest the front, closest to the presiding magistrate's chair. Their opinions would be heard first. Their voices carried the most weight. The junior senators, younger men, newer to the chamber, sat further back. They listened more than they spoke in those early years. They watched. They learned. At the far end of the chamber stood the presiding magistrate, usually one of the two consuls. He sat on a raised platform, on a simple folding chair called a curule seat. Before him lay the day's agenda, written on wax tablets or papyrus, carried by a scribe. The session was about to begin. The consul rose. Silence fell immediately, the particular silence of powerful men choosing to be quiet, which is a different and more charged silence than ordinary quiet. He spoke the opening words. An invocation to the gods, Jupiter, Janus, the divine guardians of Rome. A prayer for wisdom, for clear minds, for the good of the Republic. And then, business began. What did the Senate do exactly? Everything. Foreign policy, whether to make war or peace, to send ambassadors or legions. Provincial governance, who would govern which territory, with what powers, for how long. Finance, how much to spend on roads and temples and grain for the poor. Religion, which new gods to admit to the Roman pantheon, which festivals to observe, which priests to appoint. The Senate did not pass laws directly. That was the job of the popular assemblies, where Roman citizens voted. But the Senate debated, advised, guided. And in practice, what the Senate decided, happened. Because the men in that room controlled the armies, the money, the magistrates, the courts. Power in Rome flowed through the Senate like water through stone, slowly, patiently, inevitably. But let us not imagine the Senate as a place of perfect order. It was anything but. Romans were passionate people, argumentative people. People who believed, fiercely and completely, that their opinion was correct and that anyone who disagreed was either a fool or a villain. Debates in the Senate could last for hours. 4 days. Senators spoke in order of seniority. The most senior man first, then the next, all the way down the benches. Each man had the right to speak for as long as he wished. And some men wished to speak for a very long time indeed. There was a technique, used by senators who wanted to delay a vote they expected to lose, of simply talking. And talking. And talking. Without stopping. Without sitting down. For as long as their voices and their bodies could endure. The session ended at sunset by Roman tradition. If a vote had not been taken by then, it must wait for the next day. Talk long enough, and you could kill any proposal. The Romans called this technique, though they had no formal name for it, simply obstruction. We would recognize it today. It has survived, in various forms, for 2,000 years. The greatest weapon in the Roman Senate was not a sword. It was a voice. Roman education, for the sons of noble families, was centered almost entirely on one skill: oratory. The art of public speaking. The ability to stand before a room full of powerful, skeptical, difficult men and make them believe what you believed. Boys studied rhetoric from childhood. They memorized speeches. They practiced gestures, which hand to raise, when to pause, how to modulate the voice from a whisper to a thunderclap and back again. They studied the great speakers of the past, analyzing their techniques the way a modern athlete might study film of champions. Because in Rome, a man who could speak well could rise to heights that birth alone could never guarantee. And no one in Roman history spoke better than Marcus Tullius Cicero. Cicero was not born into Rome's highest aristocracy. He came from a municipal town called Arpinum, some distance from Rome. His family was respectable but not grand. By the rigid standards of Roman society, he was a novus homo, a new man. The first in his family to enter the Senate. This should have limited him. In Rome's intensely hierarchical world, bloodline mattered enormously. The old families, the ones who could count consuls among their ancestors, looked down on newcomers with a coldness that was almost architectural in its solidity. But Cicero had something those old families could not manufacture or inherit. He had a voice like thunder wrapped in silk. When Cicero spoke in the Senate, men who had come prepared to vote against him found themselves hesitating, reconsidering, being moved against their will by the sheer beauty and force of his arguments. He became consul, the highest office in the Republic, in 63 BC. The first new man to do so in a generation. And it was in that year that he faced the greatest crisis of his career. His name was Lucius Sergius Catilina. Catiline. A nobleman. A failed politician. A man eaten alive by debt and resentment, and a hunger for power that legitimate means had repeatedly denied him. In the shadows of Rome, Catiline had been building something dangerous. A conspiracy. A network of desperate men, ruined aristocrats, discharged soldiers, debtors, who had decided that if Rome would not give them what they wanted, they would take it. The plan was breathtaking in its audacity and its horror. Assassinate the consuls. Seize the government. Burn parts of the city to create chaos. March on Rome with an army from the north. But Cicero had spies. He knew. And on the morning of November 8, 63 BC, he stood up in the Senate of Rome, with Catiline himself sitting in the chamber, just a few benches away, and delivered one of the most famous opening lines in the history of human speech. Quousque tandem abutera, Catilina, patientia nostra. How long, O Catiline, will you abuse our patience? The words hit the chamber like stones thrown into still water. Every head turned. Every breath caught. Catiline sat very still. Cicero continued for hours, laying out the conspiracy, naming names, describing the plan in detail so precise, so damning, that Catiline could not deny it. By the end of the speech, Catiline had fled the city. The conspiracy collapsed. Rome was saved. And Cicero was proclaimed, by the grateful Senate, as Pater Patri, Father of the Fatherland. The Senate voted in a simple and direct way. When a debate was finished, when every man who wished to speak had spoken, the presiding magistrate called for a division. Those in favor, stand and move to the right. Those opposed, stand and move to the left. The sides were counted. The majority won. Simple. Visible. Impossible to hide behind. In Rome, There was no secret ballot in the Senate. Every man's vote was known to every other man. This created its own particular pressures. A junior senator might hesitate to vote against the most powerful men in the room, men who could advance or destroy his career with a word. And yet, the system worked. For centuries it worked. Not perfectly. Never perfectly. Romans were human, and humans are complicated and self-interested and sometimes corrupt. But the Senate of Rome endured for over 500 years as a functioning institution, a record that most modern democracies have not yet matched. As the afternoon sun began to sink toward the western hills, the session drew to a close. The presiding consul rose from his curule chair. The final votes were recorded by scribes on wax tablets, to be copied later onto papyrus, stored in the great treasury of Rome, the aerarium, beneath the temple of Saturn. The senators rose, stretching limbs stiffened by hours on marble benches. They gathered in small groups, old allies comparing notes, old enemies carefully avoiding each other's eyes, younger men hovering near the powerful, hoping for a word, a nod, a moment of recognition. Outside, the forum was quieting. The merchants packing away their goods. The crowds thinning as the city moved toward its evening rituals. The baths, the dinner table, the conversation of family and friends. Slowly, the senators filed out through the bronze doors. Back into the life of the city they governed. Back into Rome. The Senate would meet again tomorrow. And the day after. And the day after that. For this was the rhythm of the Republic, this endless, imperfect, magnificent conversation between powerful men about how best to govern the most powerful city on earth. It would not last forever. Nothing does. The Republic had enemies, not only beyond Rome's borders, but within its own marble halls. Ambition would grow. Power would concentrate. And one day, a man would rise who would make the Senate bow. But that, too, is a story for another chapter. For now, let the Senate sleep. Let the Forum grow quiet under the evening stars. Let Rome breathe slowly in the warm Italian night. And let us breathe with it. Slowly. Deeply. Breathe in slowly. And out. Let the world around you grow quieter still. The story continues. We have walked the muddy hills where Rome was born. We have sat in the cool marble silence of the Senate chamber, where the fate of nations was decided with words. Now, we go somewhere louder. Somewhere that shook the very ground beneath its feet. Somewhere that 80,000 Romans packed themselves together, shoulder to shoulder, under the blazing Italian sun, and roared. We go to the Colosseum. Breathe in slowly. And out. Let the world around you grow quieter still. The story continues. We have walked the muddy hills where Rome was born. We have sat in the cool marble silence of the Senate chamber, where the fate of nations was decided with words. Now, we go somewhere louder. Somewhere that shook the very ground beneath its feet. Somewhere that 80,000 Romans packed themselves together, shoulder to shoulder, under the blazing. Its official name was the Flavian Amphitheater. Named for the dynasty of emperors, the Flavians, who built it. But Romans simply called it the Amphitheatrum. The theater that goes all the way around. We call it the Colosseum. And when you stand before it, even today, even as a ruin, it takes your breath away. Sun and roared. We go to the Colosseum. And when you stand before it, even today, even as a ruin, it takes your breath away. Imagine it as it was. Whole and new. Its pale travertine limestone gleaming white in the Roman sun. Its 4 stories rising nearly 50 meters into the blue Italian sky. Its outer wall decorated with columns. Doric on the ground floor, Ionic above that, Corinthian higher still. A lesson in classical architecture stacked one story upon another. 2.5 million blocks of travertine limestone. 100,000 cubic meters of concrete. 300 tons of iron clamps holding it all together. Built in just 8 to 10 years. By tens of thousands of workers, slaves, freedmen, craftsmen, engineers, laboring under the direction of architects whose names history has mostly forgotten, but whose achievement history will never forget. The Colosseum was completed in 80 AD, under the Emperor Titus. And on the day it opened, Rome went mad with joy. Titus declared 100 days of games to celebrate the opening. 100 days. The historians record that during those 100 days, 9,000 animals were killed in the arena. Exotic beasts from the far corners of the empire, lions from Africa, tigers from Persia, elephants from the east, bears from the northern forests, hippopotamuses from the Nile. And men fought men. Gladiators, trained warriors, clashing in the sand to the roar of 80,000 throats. For 100 days Rome celebrated. And the Colosseum proved itself the greatest entertainment venue the ancient world had ever seen. But before we watch the games, let us go beneath them. Below the sand floor of the arena, beneath the feet of the gladiators and the roar of the crowd, lay a world that most spectators never saw. The Hypogeum. A vast underground network of corridors and chambers, 2 stories deep, stretching the entire length and width of the arena above. Down here, in the cool shadow beneath the city's loudest place, the machinery of spectacle was endlessly turning. Slaves operated wooden cranes and elevators, complex systems of pulleys and counterweights that could lift a platform, with a man on it, or a cage containing a lion, or an elaborate stage set, directly up through trapdoors in the arena floor above. One moment the sand was empty. The next, with a crash of trapdoors and a roar of released animals, the arena was suddenly full of chaos and terror, and the sound of 20,000 people screaming. Magic. Terrible, engineered magic. Animals were kept down here in wooden cages, lions pacing in the dark, their amber eyes catching the torchlight. Bears chained to iron rings in the wall. Strange creatures from distant lands that the Roman crowd had never seen before, and would watch die in the sunlight above. Gladiators waited down here too, in the moments before their bout. Sitting in stone chambers, listening to the roar of the crowd above their heads, feeling the vibration of 80,000 stamping feet come down through the stone and into their own bones. Thinking whatever men think, in the last moments before everything begins. Who were the gladiators? The word comes from gladius, the short Roman sword. A gladiator was, literally, a swordsman. But the reality was more complicated than that. Gladiators were not simply slaves forced to fight against their will, though some were. The truth of who became a gladiator, and why, is more human and more surprising than the simple story suggests. Yes, many gladiators were slaves. Prisoners of war from Rome's many conquests, Gauls, Germans, Greeks, Africans, Britons, men who found themselves in Roman hands and were purchased by the owners of gladiatorial training schools, called ludi. But others were volunteers. Free men, and occasionally free women, who chose the gladiatorial life deliberately. Who signed contracts surrendering certain legal rights in exchange for something the Roman world outside the arena could not easily offer them. Fame. Food. A roof. A kind of belonging. The life of a gladiator was brutal. The training was punishing. The injuries were frequent and severe. The mortality rate, in the early centuries of the games, was significant. Perhaps 1 in 5 bouts ended in death. But a successful gladiator was a celebrity. His face appeared on lamps and cups and jewelry. Women wrote him love letters. Children pretended to be him in the streets. He ate better than most Romans. He received the best medical care available. Roman gladiatorial medicine was, by necessity, remarkably sophisticated. For a slave with no prospects, or a free man with nothing, the arena offered a path. A terrible, dangerous, glittering path. but a path nonetheless. There were many types of gladiators, each with their own weapons, their own armor, their own fighting style. The Murmillo, heavily armored, carrying a large rectangular shield and a short gladius sword. Slow but protected. A wall of metal and muscle. The Retiarius, almost the opposite. Lightly armored, carrying a weighted net and a long trident. Fast and agile, his strategy was to entangle his opponent in the net and then drive the trident home. If he missed the throw, he was dangerously exposed. The Thraex, fighting in the style of the Thracians, Rome's old enemies from the north. Curved blade. Small shield. Quick, darting movements. The Secutor, the Pursuer. Designed specifically to fight the Retiarius. His smooth, rounded helmet had small eye holes to prevent the net from catching on it. He was built to chase. The matchups were carefully chosen. Murmillo against Thraex. Secutor against Retiarius. Heavy against light. Defense against speed. The net against the sword. The crowd knew the types intimately. They had their favorites. They argued about matchups the way modern sports fans argue about their teams. And they were loud about their opinions. Very, very loud. The moment the gladiators entered the arena, everything changed. The noise hit you like a physical thing. 80,000 voices, rising together. The stamping of feet on the stone tiers. A rhythmic thunder that you felt in your chest, in your teeth, in the soles of your feet. The gladiators processed around the arena first, the pampa, the parade. Showing themselves to the crowd. The crowd evaluating them, deciding their favorites, beginning to place their bets. Because there was always betting. Romans bet on everything. Then the signal came. The trumpets sounded. And the fighting began. What happened in those moments in the sand was nothing like the movies. Nothing like the theatrical choreography of modern imagination. It was fast. Brutal. Exhausting. Gladiators were trained to conserve energy, to look for the one decisive opening rather than simply swinging wildly. They circled. They feinted. They tested each other's defenses with quick probing attacks, looking for a weakness, waiting for a mistake. The crowd watched every movement with expert eyes. They knew what they were looking at. They could read the fight the way a musician reads music. And when one man finally gained the advantage, when the other stumbled, or dropped his guard, or was driven back against the arena wall, the crowd came to its feet. 80,000 people, standing. The roar was enormous. When one gladiator was down, the decision had to be made. The fallen man, if he could, would raise one finger, a signal of submission. An acknowledgement that he had lost. A request for mercy. Whether he received it was not always up to the victor. The editor, the man who had paid for the games, often the emperor himself, made the final call. He read the crowd. If the fallen man had fought well, if he had given the audience a good show, if the crowd was calling for mercy, the editor would grant it. A wave of a handkerchief. A turned thumb, though historians debate exactly what gesture was used. But the meaning was clear. Live. If the fallen man had fought poorly, had shown cowardice, had not given the crowd their money's worth, the verdict might go the other way. Finish it. And the victor would step forward. The crowd would watch in absolute silence. The particular silence that falls when something final and irreversible is about to happen. And then it would be over. And the silence would shatter into noise again. The victor was celebrated. A laurel wreath placed on his head. A palm branch put in his hand, the ancient symbol of victory. Sometimes a purse of coins. Sometimes his freedom, if he was a slave. He walked around the arena, one full circuit, arms raised, while the crowd roared his name. In that moment, in that arena, he was the most famous person in Rome. more famous than senators, more beloved than generals. For those few minutes, walking in the roaring sunlight with the crowd's adoration washing over him like a warm wave, he was everything Rome dreamed of being: strong, victorious, alive. Gladiatorial combat was not the only spectacle the Colosseum offered. There were the venations, the animal hunts. Hunters called venators entered the arena to face exotic beasts from across the empire. Lions from North Africa, leopards from the east, bulls, bears, wild boars, ostriches, even crocodiles, brought up the Nile and transported across the Mediterranean in great wooden crates. The arena floor would be transformed for these events. Elaborate stage sets, painted backdrops, artificial trees and rocks created the illusion of a forest or a desert landscape. The animals were released from below, through the trapdoors, into this artificial wilderness. And the hunters went in after them. Romans loved these spectacles almost as much as the gladiatorial fights. They offered something the fights could not: the chance to see animals that most Romans would never encounter in ordinary life. Strange and beautiful and terrifying creatures from the far edges of the known world. Brought to Rome. Put on display. Killed for entertainment. It is not comfortable, for modern eyes, to look at. The scale of animal slaughter over the centuries of the Colosseum's operation was immense. Historians estimate hundreds of thousands of animals killed over the building's active life. But for Rome, it was proof of something. Proof of reach. Proof of power. Proof that the empire extended so far, and commanded so much, that it could fill its arenas with lions and elephants, and creatures its citizens had only heard of in travelers' tales. "We are Rome," the Colosseum said, with every roar of a dying lion. "The world is ours." As the sun began to sink toward the Palatine Hill, the last bout of the day ended. The sand was raked clean, or as clean as it could be made. Fresh sand spread over the dark stains of the afternoon. The crowd began to file out through the 80-numbered arches, the vomitoria, the Romans called them, these great exit passages, each arch marked with a number corresponding to the ticket, or the wooden token, that told each spectator which section was theirs. 20 minutes. That was how long it took to empty the entire Colosseum of 80,000 people. A feat of engineering and crowd management that most modern stadiums, with all their technology, still struggle to match. Outside, the vendors were packing up. The food stalls closing. The crowds dispersing into the evening streets of Rome, talking about what they had seen. Arguing about the decisions. Replaying the best moments. The way people have always talked about sport. The way people always will. The Colosseum still stands. Damaged by earthquakes. Stripped of much of its marble and stone by medieval builders who used it as a quarry. Scarred by centuries of neglect and weather. And yet, it stands. Nearly 2,000 years after its completion, it remains the largest amphitheater ever built. The most visited ancient monument on Earth. A symbol of Rome so powerful that people travel from every corner of the globe simply to stand before it. Simply to look up. And feel, for one quiet moment, how small we are. How briefly we exist. And how extraordinary it is, how genuinely extraordinary, that human beings, in their brief time on Earth, can build something so large and so lasting that it endures for 2,000 years. And still takes your breath away. Close your eyes. Hear the crowd fading. The roar of 80,000 voices growing quieter and quieter, like a wave retreating from shore. Until there is only silence. And the stars above the eternal city. Coming out, one by one, in the darkening Roman sky. Rest now. The Colosseum sleeps. And we sleep with it. Breathe slowly. Let your body grow heavier. Deeper into rest. The story of Rome continues. We have watched Rome born from legend and river mud. We have sat in the cool marble chambers of the Senate, where words were the sharpest weapons. We have felt the ground shake beneath 80,000 roaring voices in the Colosseum. Now, we come to a man, a single man, who changed everything, who took the broken, bleeding Republic of Rome, torn apart by a century of civil wars, and rebuilt it into something new, something that would last for 500 more years. His name, at birth, was simply Gaius Octavius, but history knows him as Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. He was 18 years old when his world changed forever. The year was 44 BC. His great-uncle, a man named Gaius Julius Caesar, the most powerful man in Rome, had just been assassinated. 23 stab wounds. On the floor of the Senate. By men who called themselves liberators. Octavian was far from Rome when it happened, studying in the Greek city of Apollonia, preparing for a military campaign his great-uncle had been planning against Parthia. When the news arrived, most people in Rome expected the 18-year-old to do the sensible thing. Go home. Stay quiet. Stay safe. Let the powerful men, the assassins, the generals, the senators, sort out the chaos among themselves. Octavian did not do the sensible thing. He sailed back to Italy, and he entered the storm. What Octavian had that no one expected was not an army. Not yet. It was a name. Caesar's will, read publicly in Rome in the days after the assassination, contained a stunning revelation. Caesar had adopted Octavian posthumously as his son, his heir. The young man from Apollonia was now, legally and formally, Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus. A Caesar. And Caesar's name, even in death, was the most powerful word in the Roman world. Soldiers who had served under Julius Caesar, hardened veterans of the Gallic Wars, of the Civil Wars, men who had followed Caesar from Spain to Egypt and back again, heard that name and remembered. And they began to come. Slowly at first. Then faster. The 18-year-old who everyone had expected to go home quietly was building an army. What followed was 13 more years of chaos. 13 years of shifting alliances and betrayals and battles and negotiations. A brutal, complicated game of power played across the entire Mediterranean world. Octavian allied with Mark Antony, Caesar's former lieutenant, against the assassins. The assassins were defeated. Then Octavian and Antony turned on each other. It was inevitable, really. Rome was not big enough for two men who both wanted everything. Mark Antony went east. He allied himself with Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, the last of the great Ptolemaic dynasty that had ruled since Alexander the Great. Together, Antony and Cleopatra built a power base in the east that challenged everything Octavian was building in the west. Two visions of Rome. Two possible futures. Only one could survive. The final battle came at sea. Near the Greek promontory of Actium, in 31 BC, the two fleets met. Octavian's admiral, a brilliant general named Agrippa, had spent months preparing, positioning, waiting for exactly the right moment. When the battle came, it was decisive. Antony and Cleopatra's fleet was broken, outmaneuvered, caught in a trap from which there was no escape. Antony and Cleopatra fled south, back to Egypt. Octavian followed. And in Alexandria, in the summer of 30 BC, the last act played out. Antony, believing Cleopatra dead, fell on his own sword. Cleopatra, refusing to be paraded through Rome in chains as a captive, as the prize of Octavian's triumph, took her own life. The method the old stories give her, a serpent, an asp, held to her breast, may or may not be true. But the result was certain. Egypt fell to Rome. The last independent kingdom of the ancient Mediterranean world was gone. And Octavian stood alone, master of everything. He returned to Rome in triumph. The city welcomed him with a joy that was partly celebration and partly sheer relief. Rome had been at war, internal war, civil war, the worst kind, for nearly 100 years. Generations had been born and died never knowing what peace felt like. The farms were exhausted. The treasury was strained. The people were tired in their very bones. And here was a man, young, victorious, the heir of Caesar, who seemed to promise that it was finally over. Octavian understood something that Julius Caesar had not. Caesar had won his wars, had made himself dictator, essentially king, in all but name, and had been murdered for it, by men who could not bear to see the Republic die. Octavian would not make that mistake. He would not call himself king, would not call himself dictator, would not even, technically, call himself emperor. The word imperator simply meant a victorious general, and many men had held that title. Instead, he gave the power back. In 27 BC, Octavian appeared before the Senate, and he announced that his work was done. The wars were over. The Republic was restored. He was returning all his extraordinary powers to the Senate and the people of Rome. The senators were stunned. And then, they refused to accept it. This was theater, carefully choreographed theater, but it was also something more than that. The senators genuinely did not want to go back to the chaos that had existed before Octavian. They had seen what Roman politics without a strong central authority looked like. They had no desire to see it again, and so they gave him his powers back, but dressed them differently. They gave him a new title. Not king, not dictator. Augustus, the revered one, the magnificent. A word with religious weight, suggesting someone set slightly apart from ordinary mortals. Someone touched by the divine. He also held the title princeps, first citizen, the leader of the Senate, first among equals. It was the perfect disguise. All the power of a king, none of the dangerous name. The Republic still existed, technically. The Senate still met. Elections were still held. But everyone understood that the man called Augustus made the decisions. Rome had an emperor. Rome had an emperor. It just wasn't polite to say so out loud. Augustus ruled for 41 years. The longest reign of any Roman emperor. And in those 41 years he transformed Rome so completely that the city his successor inherited was almost unrecognizable from the one he had inherited. He famously said, and his biographers recorded it, that he had found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble. It was not quite literally true, but it captured something real. Under Augustus, the Forum was rebuilt and expanded. Temples were restored, 82 of them, by his own count. New public buildings rose across the city. Baths, theaters, libraries, monuments. His own Forum of Augustus, anchored by the magnificent temple of Mars altar, Mars the Avenger, was one of the grandest public spaces Rome had ever seen. The roads were repaired. The water supply improved. A permanent fire brigade established. Rome had burned catastrophically before, and Augustus was determined to prevent it again. A police force created. A standing army regularized. Soldiers who knew their terms of service, their pay, their pension on retirement. Not the private armies of competing generals that had torn Rome apart, but a professional force loyal to the state. Or rather, loyal to Augustus. Which, under his careful management, was the same thing. The period of Augustus's rule became known, in later centuries, as the beginning of the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. 200 years, from Augustus to the reign of Marcus Aurelius, during which the Mediterranean world experienced a degree of stability, prosperity, and relative peace that it had never known before and would not know again for a very long time. Trade flowed. Roads connected distant provinces to Rome. The same laws applied from Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Syria. A merchant in Alexandria could read the same laws, use the same currency, write to the same courts as a merchant in Londinium. It was, in many ways, the first great experiment in globalization. And it worked. Under Roman peace, cities grew. Art flourished. Literature reached heights it had rarely achieved before. Virgil wrote the Aeneid, Rome's great founding epic. Horace wrote his odes. Ovid told the stories of the gods. Livy wrote the history of Rome from its beginnings. Augustus encouraged all of this. Consciously. Deliberately. He understood that an empire needed not only armies and roads and laws. It needed stories. Songs. Poems that made people feel the glory and meaning of being Roman. He was, in the most modern sense of the word, a master of narrative. In his old age, Augustus was tired. The endless management of an empire, the diplomacy, the appointments, the endless flow of petitions and decisions and problems, had worn him down. He had outlived many of the people he loved. His old friend and admiral Agrippa. His nephew Marcellus, whom he had hoped to name as successor. His grandsons Gaius and Lucius, both dead young. His personal life had been complicated by his daughter Julia, brilliant, charming, and spectacularly rebellious, whom he had eventually been forced to exile for behavior that embarrassed him. Power, even absolute power, could not protect a man from grief. He spent his final years more quietly. His wife Livia, a formidable woman who had been his partner and counselor for more than 50 years, was constantly at his side. His chosen successor was his stepson Tiberius, not his first choice, not his second, but the man who remained when others had died. A capable soldier. A competent administrator. Cold where Augustus had been warm. But capable. Augustus died in 14 AD. He was 75 years old, remarkable longevity for any man of his era, let alone one who had spent his life in the stress of wars and politics. He died at Nola, in Campania, in the house where his father had died before him. His last words, according to his biographer Suetonius, were spoken to the friends gathered around his bed. He asked them if he had played his part well in the comedy of life. And then he said, as actors said at the end of a performance in the Roman theater, "If I have pleased you, kindly signify your appreciation with applause." Even at the end. The theater. The performance. The careful management of appearance. Till the very last breath. The Senate declared him a god. Divus Augustus. The divine Augustus. His ashes were placed in the great mausoleum he had built for himself decades earlier, on the banks of the Tiber. And Rome mourned. And then, Rome continued. As it always had. As perhaps it always would. The stars came out over Rome. As they had on the night of its founding. As they had over every Senate debate, every gladiatorial bout, every triumph and disaster and quiet, ordinary evening in the life of the greatest city the ancient world had ever known. Rome slept. In its baths and its taverns and its grand marble houses and its cramped apartment buildings 6 stories high. In its temples and its barracks, and its markets silent now in the dark. 80,000 people. Then 1,000,000. The largest city on earth. All of them breathing slowly. All of them, tonight at peace. Under the same stars that had watched Romulus plow his first furrow in the earth of the Palatine Hill. Under the same stars that would watch, centuries from now, the last Western emperor quietly surrender his crown. But that is far away. Tonight, Rome is at its height. And we rest with it. Breathe slowly. Breathe slowly. Let your eyes grow heavy. The story continues. We have watched Rome born from legend. We have sat in the Senate's marble silence. We have heard the roar of the Colosseum. We have followed Augustus as he rebuilt a broken world. Now, we step away from the grand stages of history. away from emperors and senators and gladiators. And we walk quietly into the streets of Rome, into the everyday, into the life that most Romans actually lived. Not the history of great men, but the history of ordinary ones. The sun rises over Rome. Not gently. Romans had no word for a slow morning. The city came alive before dawn, before the first light had even touched the top of the Capitoline Hill, with a noise and energy that would overwhelm a modern visitor accustomed to alarm clocks and quiet kitchens. The streets of Rome never truly slept. But at dawn, they roared back to life. The carts arrived first. Roman law, sensible, practical Roman law, had long ago banned wheeled vehicles from the city streets during daylight hours. The streets were too narrow, the crowds too thick, the chaos too dangerous. And so the merchants and suppliers who kept Rome fed and clothed and furnished did their deliveries at night and in the early morning hours, before the ban took effect. Dawn meant the end of the carts, the last of them rumbling away through the city gates as the sun climbed the eastern sky. And in their place, the people came. Imagine walking through a Roman street in the morning. The first thing you notice is the smell. Rome smelled powerfully and complexly. Bread baking in the dozens of small bakeries, the pastrini that lined every neighborhood. Garlic and fish sauce, garum, the Romans' beloved condiment, made from fermented fish, which they put on almost everything. Fresh herbs. Horses. Sewage, never entirely absent in a city of 1 million people despite the remarkable engineering of the Cloaca Maxima below. And beneath all of it, always, the faint clean smell of the Tiber, water and mud and distance. The street itself was narrow. Surprisingly narrow, to modern eyes. Most Roman streets were no wider than a modern hallway, barely enough for 2 people to pass each other comfortably. The buildings on either side rose 4, 5, 6 stories into the air, great apartment blocks called insulae, islands of humanity stacked one family on top of another. The wealthy lived on the lower floors, where the ceilings were higher and the noise from the street was slightly less. The poor climbed higher, up dark narrow staircases to tiny rooms under the roof, where the heat in summer was brutal and the cold in winter came through the walls. But everyone spilled out into the street. Romans lived their lives outdoors, in ways that modern people, accustomed to the privacy of enclosed spaces, might find almost uncomfortably public. The shops opened early. Roman shops were not like modern shops, separate buildings you enter through a door. They were open-fronted spaces, their wide openings facing directly onto the street, the counter at the front serving as the boundary between shop and pavement. A bread shop, a wine shop, a cobbler's, a barber's, a place selling hot food, a thermopolium, with its counter of terracotta pots set into the stone, each one holding a different prepared dish, kept warm by charcoal below. This was the Roman equivalent of street food. And Romans loved it. Most ordinary Romans had no kitchen. The insulae were fire traps, wooden floors, cramped spaces, charcoal braziers that could ignite a building in minutes. And so most city Romans ate out. They bought their meals from the thermopolia, from the street vendors, from the bakeries. Hot chickpea soup. Bread still warm from the oven. Olives in brine. Cheese. Sausages grilled over charcoal. Wine mixed with water, always mixed with water, because Romans considered drinking wine unmixed a sign of barbarian excess. The Roman street was a restaurant, a market, a social club. All at once, all the time. By mid-morning the Forum filled. The great open space at the heart of the city, surrounded by temples and government buildings and the rostra, the speaker's platform decorated with the bronze rams of captured enemy ships, was Rome's living room. Everyone came to the Forum. Businessmen completing deals, lawyers arguing cases in the open air before magistrates seated on folding chairs, politicians working the crowd, philosophers debating in the shade of a colonnade, tourists from the provinces staring open-mouthed at the scale of it all. Slaves ran errands for their masters. Freedmen, former slaves who had earned or been given their freedom, conducted their own business. Women moved through the crowd, accompanied by attendants, managing their household's affairs with a quiet efficiency that Roman social convention preferred not to notice too loudly. Because Roman women, despite the legal restrictions placed on them, were far more present in public life than the formal rules suggested. They ran businesses. They managed estates. They educated their children. They corresponded with politicians and philosophers. In the great houses, the mistress of the household, the domina, had authority over the dozens or hundreds of people who made up the Roman domestic world. The rules said they were subordinate. The reality was considerably more complicated. By midday, the heat drove the city indoors. The Italian summer sun was merciless. The marble streets reflected it upward. The narrow alleys trapped it. Rome took a break. Shops closed. The forum emptied. The streets grew quiet, or as quiet as Rome ever got. And then, in the late afternoon, the city came alive again. For the baths. The thermae. The public baths of Rome. If the forum was Rome's living room, the baths were its social heart. Every Roman city had them. Rome itself had hundreds of smaller neighborhood baths, and eventually a handful of enormous imperial thermae, the baths of Caracalla, the baths of Diocletian, that could accommodate thousands of bathers at once. The entry fee was minimal, almost nothing. Sometimes free, when a wealthy patron was feeling generous. This was deliberate. The baths were for everyone. Rich and poor, citizen and freedman, old and young. Inside, the experience was extraordinary. You entered through a changing room, the apoditorium, where you left your clothes in a numbered cubicle. You handed your valuables to an attendant, because theft in the changing rooms was a perennial problem that no amount of legislation seemed to solve. Then you moved through a sequence of rooms, each warmer than the last. The frigidarium, the cold room, with its great cold plunge pool. The tepidarium, the warm room, where you could sit and acclimatize and begin to sweat. The caldarium, the hot room, filled with steam from the hypocaust heating system below, where the floors and walls were warm to the touch, where the heat opened every pore and loosened every muscle. Slaves called strigulars worked the rooms, scraping the oil and sweat and dirt from bathers' skin with a curved metal tool called a strigil, then applying fresh oil. Masseurs moved through the crowds, their hands finding every knot of tension in tired working bodies. There was no soap. Not as we know it. But the Romans had understood, from long experience, that oil plus scraping plus hot water was an effective system. They were right. But the baths were not really about bathing. They were about everything else. In the great thermae, surrounding the bathing halls, were libraries, reading rooms, gardens, exercise yards where men wrestled and lifted weights and played ball games, snack bars selling food and drink, barbers and hairdressers and beauty treatments. And everywhere, in every room, on every bench and in every corridor, people talked. The baths were where Rome's endless conversation happened, where business deals were made, where political gossip spread from one end of the city to the other in an afternoon, where philosophers debated, where friends caught up, where strangers became acquaintances. A Roman senator and a Roman shopkeeper, both in the baths, were briefly equal, stripped of their togas and their social signals, both simply human beings in the steam. It was, in its imperfect Roman way, one of the most democratic spaces in the ancient world. Evening came slowly to Rome. The sun sank behind the Janiculum hill to the west, painting the Tiber golden and the marble temples amber, and the white apartment buildings a warm honey color that made the city look, for a few minutes, like something from a dream. The thermopolia and wine shops filled with the after-work crowd. The noise level rose. Voices and laughter spilled out into the cooling streets. Romans ate their main meal in the evening, the cena. In wealthy households, this was an elaborate affair. Guests reclined on cushioned couches arranged around a low table. Romans did not sit to eat, they lay on their sides, propped on one elbow, the other hand free for food and wine. Multiple courses. Elaborate dishes. Musicians playing in the background. Conversation flowing as freely as the wine. For the poor, the evening meal was simpler. Bread and olives. Whatever was left from the thermopolium. Shared in the cramped rooms of the insula with family, and perhaps a neighbor or two. But shared. Romans, rich and poor, understood that meals were not just about food. They were about being human together. Night fell over Rome. The oil lamps came out, small clay vessels with a wick floating in olive oil, casting a warm but limited circle of golden light. The wealthy had more of them. The poor made do with fewer. The streets grew darker and more dangerous. Rome at night was not a place for the cautious. The streets were unlit, no public lighting existed. The carts returned, their wheels loud on the stone. Thieves worked in the shadows. The vigiles, Rome's night watchmen and fire brigade, patrolled with torches, but they were too few for a city of 1,000,000. Most Romans, if they had any choice, stayed home after dark. They sat by their lamps. They talked. They read, if they were literate, and surprisingly many Romans were, even among the working classes. They told stories to their children. They listened to the sounds of the city settling around them. The distant rumble of carts. A dog barking somewhere. The murmur of voices through a thin wall. The sound of music from a tavern a few streets away, growing fainter as the night deepened. And slowly, one by one, the lamps went out. Rome slept. 1,000,000 people, breathing together in the dark, dreaming their Roman dreams, under the stars that had watched this city since before memory. And we sleep with them. Let your breathing slow now. Let the sounds of the ancient city fade away. The market voices, the bathhouse steam, the evening laughter, all of it growing quieter, more distant, like music heard from the next room. You are safe. You are warm. The story of Rome surrounds you like the city's own ancient walls. Rest now. Chapter 6 will be waiting. When morning comes, breathe in and out. Let your body grow heavier with each breath. The story continues. We have walked the streets of Rome. We have eaten in its markets, sweated in its baths, watched its lamps go out one by one in the night. Now, we leave the city behind. We march. Because Rome was not built only in Rome. It was built on the roads that stretched out from Rome like the spokes of a great wheel, reaching north into the forests of Germania, south into the deserts of Africa, east into the ancient lands of Persia, west to the cold gray shores of Britain. And on those roads marched the legions. The Roman legion. There is no military force in human history quite like it. Not in its organization. Not in its discipline. Not in the sheer, relentless, grinding effectiveness with which it turned ordinary men, farmers and shepherds and craftsmen, into the finest soldiers the ancient world had ever seen. A legion at full strength numbered around 5,000 men. 5,000. In a world where most armies were loose collections of tribal warriors who fought with individual courage and limited coordination, 5,000 Roman legionaries, moving together, thinking together, fighting as a single disciplined organism, were almost unstoppable. Who were these men? They were Roman citizens. That was the first requirement. Only citizens could serve in the legions. Non-citizens could serve in the auxiliary units that supported the legions, and often earned citizenship through their service. But the core, the heart of the Roman army, was made of citizens. They were volunteers in the imperial era. Men who chose the military life, signed on for 25 years of service in exchange for regular pay, food, equipment, housing, medical care, and at the end, a pension, either a sum of money or a plot of land. 25 years. Almost. That is a long time to give to anything. A young man of 18 who signed his papers would be 43 before he was done. If he survived. Many did not. But for a man with no land, no trade, no prospects, a man from a poor family in a provincial town with nothing to look forward to but a lifetime of hard labor and hunger, 25 years in the legions offered something remarkable. A life. A real life. With purpose and structure and comrades and adventure, and the chance to see the world far beyond the village where he was born. Rome always found its soldiers. The training began immediately. And it was brutal. Roman military training was designed not merely to teach men to fight. Any man can be taught to swing a sword in a few weeks. It was designed to build something deeper. To create, through months of shared suffering and discipline, a bond between soldiers that would hold even when everything around them was chaos and blood and terror. They marched. Every day. Long distances, in full armor and equipment, at a pace that would exhaust a modern athlete. 30 Roman miles, roughly 28 modern miles, in 5 hours, in full kit. Standard march. Not a forced march. The regular, everyday speed of a Roman legion on the move. They dug. Every time the legion made camp, even for a single night, they constructed a fortified camp. Ditch, rampart, palisade wall, for gates, internal streets laid out in the same pattern every time, so that any soldier who woke in the dark would know exactly where he was. This took hours of hard labor after a day of marching. It was done every time, without exception, for the entire duration of a campaign, which might last for years. They drilled with wooden weapons, practiced swords heavier than the real ones, so that when the real blade was in a soldier's hand, it felt light. They practiced the movements over and over and over, the shield raised just so, the sword thrust in this precise way, the step forward timed exactly with the man beside them. Until it was not thought. Until it was reflex. Until the body knew what to do even when the mind was overwhelmed by noise and fear and the smell of blood. The equipment of the Roman legionary was a marvel of military engineering. The helmet, the galea, covered the head and cheeks and neck, leaving the face exposed but protecting everything else. Designed after long experience to deflect the blows most likely to be lethal. The armor, the larica segmentata in the imperial period, overlapping strips of iron attached to leather straps. Flexible enough to move in. Strong enough to stop most blows. Heavy, around 10 kilograms of armor alone, before equipment. The shield, the scutum. Large, curved, rectangular. Made of laminated wood faced with leather and edged with iron. Heavy but brilliantly designed, its curved shape deflected blows rather than absorbing them directly. When a line of Roman soldiers raised their shields together, they created a wall of overlapping protection that was extraordinarily difficult to breach. The pilum, the javelin. Each legionary carried 2. At about 2 meters long, weighted at the tip, designed to be thrown at the moment just before close combat. The pilum was a masterpiece of military engineering. Its iron shank was deliberately designed to bend on impact, so that if it struck a shield, it could not be thrown back. It hung there, pulling the shield down, making the enemy expose himself just as the Romans closed for close combat. And then came the gladius, the short sword. Perhaps 50 to 60 centimeters of iron, double-edged, pointed. Not for slashing. For stabbing. The Romans had learned, from long experience, that in the crush of close combat, a short stabbing sword was deadlier than a long slashing blade. There was no room to swing. But there was always room for one short, precise, lethal thrust. The gladiators built an empire. In battle, the legion moved as one. The centuries, units of 80 men, commanded by a centurion, advanced in their ordered lines. Shields up. Pila ready? At the command, the pila flew. A storm of heavy javelins crashing into the enemy line. Shields wrenched down by bent iron shanks. Men stumbling. And in that moment of disruption, the Romans closed. Shield to shield with the enemy. Pushing. Stabbing with the gladius in short, economical thrusts. The man on your left protecting you with his shield. You protecting the man on your right with yours. Not individual combat. Not the heroic single combat of the old epic poems. A machine. A human machine, grinding forward. And very few things on earth could stop it. But the legion was more than a fighting force. This is what most people miss when they think of the Roman army. The legions built Rome. Literally built it. Every legionary was also an engineer. Trained not only to fight but to construct roads, bridges, forts, aqueducts, siege works. When there was no war to fight, the legions built. The remarkable road network that connected the Roman Empire, over 400,000 kilometers of roads, much of it still visible today, was built largely by legionary labor. Straight roads, engineered with layers of stone and gravel, cambered to drain water, marked with milestones, maintained by regular patrols. The Romans built roads the way modern nations build highways, as infrastructure for military movement and economic integration. A legion could march from Rome to the Rhine in weeks on those roads. Supplies could flow. Messages could travel. The roads were as much a weapon of empire as the gladius. And the men who built them were the same men who fought with them. The centurions. We cannot speak of the Roman legion without speaking of its centurions. They were the backbone of the army. Not the generals gave orders from above. Not the common soldiers, the soldiers followed orders from below. The centurions were the middle. The crucial, irreplaceable middle. A centurion commanded 80 men. He knew their names, their strengths, their weaknesses, their family situations, their health, their morale. He was responsible for their training, their discipline, their performance in battle. If his men faltered, it reflected on him. If they excelled, it was his achievement. Centurions were identified by their equipment, a transverse crest on their helmet, running side to side rather than front to back. A vine stick, the vitus, which they carried as a symbol of authority and used, without hesitation, to beat soldiers who failed to meet the standard. Roman military discipline was harsh by any standard. Cowardice in battle could be punished by decimation, the most terrifying punishment in the Roman military vocabulary. If a unit broke and ran, 1 soldier in 10 was selected by lot and beaten to death by his comrades. The other 9 had to watch. It happened rarely. The threat was enough. Because a Roman soldier feared his centurion more than he feared the enemy. And that fear, transformed through training and shared hardship into something closer to respect and pride, was what held the line when everything else broke apart. The greatest test of the Roman legion came not against any single enemy, but against Rome's greatest nightmare, Hannibal Barca. The Carthaginian general who crossed the Alps with his army and his elephants, in winter, through snow and ice and impossible terrain, and descended into Italy to strike Rome from within. For 15 years, Hannibal marched through Italy. He won battle after battle. At Trebia, at Lake Trasimene, at Cannae, the most catastrophic defeat in Roman military history, where perhaps 70,000 Romans died in a single afternoon, surrounded and destroyed by Hannibal's genius. Rome reeled. Its allies wavered. Some defected. The city prepared for a siege that seemed inevitable. But Rome did not break. It did something more remarkable. It changed. It stopped fighting Hannibal directly, stopped offering him the set-piece battles where his genius could operate. Instead, it harassed. It picked off his supply lines. It retook his allied cities one by one. It sent armies to attack Carthage itself in Africa, forcing Hannibal to abandon Italy and return home to defend his own city. And at Zama, in 202 BC, the Roman general Scipio Africanus met Hannibal on the plains of North Africa. And Rome won. Hannibal, the greatest general the ancient world had produced, was defeated. Not by matching his genius, but by Rome's most fundamental quality: stubbornness. The refusal to accept that losing meant it was over. The Romans had a word for it: virtus. Courage. But more than courage. The willingness to endure, to persist, to keep going when every rational calculation said to stop. It was the same quality that had driven those early settlers on the Palatine Hill. The same quality that had rebuilt the city after the Gauls burned it to the ground in 390 BC. The same quality that would drive Rome to rebuild after every disaster, every defeat, every setback. Rome lost battles. Rome never accepted that it had lost the war. The last watch of the night. The legion's camp was quiet now. The fires burned low. The sentries walked their slow rounds at the camp's four corners, their footsteps steady on the packed earth. Inside the tents, 5,000 men slept. Farmers' sons. Fishermen's sons. Men from Gaul and Spain and Greece and Syria, all of them now Roman, all of them breathing the same air under the same leather tent. Tomorrow they would march again. 28 miles. In armor. Before noon. And they would do it without complaint. Because they were legionaries. Because they were Rome. And Rome, as every one of them knew in their bones, never stopped. Let the campfires fade now. Let the sentries' footsteps grow quieter. Let the vast dark of the ancient world settle over the sleeping legion. You are safe. You are warm. Far from the march and the cold and the weight of armor. Rest now. The story of Rome continues. In the morning, breathe in slowly, and out. Let the world grow quieter still. This is the final chapter, the last story of Rome tonight. We have come a long way together. We have stood on the muddy hills where Romulus first drew his plow through the earth. We have sat in the cool marble silence of the Senate. We have felt the roar of 80,000 voices in the Colosseum. We have followed Augustus as he rebuilt a shattered world. We have walked the streets of the eternal city, its markets and baths and lamplit evening streets. We have marched with the legions across the known world. And now, we come to the end. Not a sudden end. Not a dramatic crash. But a slow, long twilight. The kind of ending that takes centuries. The fall of Rome. Let us begin with something important. Rome did not fall on a single day. There was no morning when Romans woke to find their world gone. No single battle, no single emperor, no single catastrophe that ended everything at once. The fall of Rome was a process. Long, complicated, painful, and, like all truly great endings, full of moments where it seemed like things might yet turn around. Historians debate the causes endlessly. They have been debating them for 1,500 years, and they will debate them for 1,500 more. But certain things are clear. Certain fault lines ran through the Roman world that, over centuries, widened and deepened until the structure above them could no longer hold. The first fault line was size. Rome's greatest strength, its endless expansion, its hunger to incorporate new territories, new peoples, new resources, became, over time, its greatest weakness. An empire that stretches from Britain to Mesopotamia, from the Rhine to the Sahara, is an empire that is very, very difficult to govern. Messages took weeks to travel from the frontier to Rome. Decisions made in the capital arrived at the borders months later, sometimes too late, sometimes wrong, because the situation had already changed. Governors in distant provinces accumulated enormous power that was necessary for them to function so far from central authority, but power that also made them dangerous. Ambitious men with armies under their command and thousands of miles between themselves and any oversight. Rome had always had ambitious men. In the early Republic, the Senate had kept them in check. In the early Empire, strong emperors had managed them. But as the empire grew larger and the center grew weaker, the balance shifted. The second fault line was the army. The legions that had built Rome became, in the later centuries, Rome's most dangerous internal threat. Because the legions made emperors. This had always been true, to some extent. Augustus had understood it, had built the Praetorian Guard, the elite imperial bodyguard, as a way of keeping the most dangerous soldiers close to Rome and under direct imperial control. But as the 3rd century AD arrived, the system began to break down catastrophically. In the 50 years between 235 and 284 AD, a period historians called the crisis of the 3rd century, Rome had more than 50 different emperors. 50. In 50 years. Most of them died violently. Killed by rivals. Killed by their own soldiers. Killed by the enemies they had no time to properly fight because they were too busy watching their backs. Emperors rose and fell like seasons. A general would be proclaimed emperor by his troops on the Rhine frontier. He would march on Rome. He would take power. He would last a few months, perhaps a few years. Then another general, on another frontier, with another army, would do the same thing. Rome was devouring itself. The third fault line was money. War is expensive. And Rome, in its later centuries, was always at war. On the Rhine. On the Danube. In the east against the revived Persian Empire, the Sassanids, fierce and capable enemies who had replaced the Parthians and proved far more dangerous. To pay for the wars, Rome needed money. The mines that had once supplied Rome's silver, in Spain, in the Balkans, were running low. The easy conquests that had once poured wealth into the treasury were long past. There were no more Egypts to conquer, no more treasuries of eastern kingdoms to plunder. And so Rome debased its currency. The silver content of Roman coins was gradually reduced, a little at a time, each reduction small enough to seem manageable. From nearly pure silver in the early empire to coins that were, by the late 3rd century, little more than bronze with a thin silver wash. The result was inflation. Terrible, grinding inflation. Prices rose. Soldiers demanded more pay to keep up with rising prices. More pay meant more debasement. More debasement meant more inflation. A vicious circle that Rome could never quite escape. Kingdoms to plunder. And so Rome debased its currency. The silver content of Roman coins was gradually reduced, a little at a time, each reduction small enough to seem manageable. From nearly pure silver in the early empire to coins that were, by the late 3rd century, little more than bronze with a thin silver wash. The result was inflation. Terrible, grinding inflation. Prices rose. Soldiers demanded more pay to keep up with rising prices. More pay meant more debasement. More debasement meant more inflation. A vicious circle that Rome could never quite escape. And yet Rome endured. This is perhaps the most remarkable thing of all. Even in the crisis of the 3rd century, even with 50 emperors in 50 years, with the frontiers under pressure and the currency collapsing and the army out of control, Rome did not fall. It staggered. It bled. It nearly broke. But it found, as it had always found in its darkest moments, a man. His name was Diocletian. A soldier from the Balkans, the son of a former slave, risen through the ranks by sheer ability. He was proclaimed emperor in 284 AD. And he did something no one had done before. He reorganized everything. He split the empire into two administrative halves, east and west, each with its own emperor, its own administration, its own army. He reformed the currency. He rebuilt the frontier defenses. He restructured the tax system. Rome breathed again. His successor, Constantine, went further still. He moved the capital eastward, to a new city he built on the site of the old Greek town of Byzantium, at the crossing point between Europe and Asia. He called it Constantinople, the city of Constantine. And he made one more change that would echo through all of subsequent history. He made Christianity the favored religion of the Roman Empire. Christianity had been spreading through the Roman world for 3 centuries, quietly at first, in the catacombs and private houses, persecuted periodically by emperors who saw it as a threat to Roman religious order. But it had spread nonetheless. Along Rome's roads, those magnificent roads built by the legions, the new faith had traveled. From Jerusalem to Antioch. From Antioch to Rome. From Rome to the furthest corners of the empire. By Constantine's time, Christians were a significant portion of the empire's population. Constantine saw in this not a threat but an opportunity. A unified religion for a unified empire. One faith, one emperor, one Rome. It was a vision of extraordinary ambition. And it half worked. The Eastern Empire, richer, more urbanized, better defended, stabilized under the new system. Constantinople became one of the greatest cities in the world. The Eastern Roman Empire, which we now call the Byzantine Empire, would survive for another 1,000 years. 1,000 years. The Western Empire was a different story. The western provinces were poorer, less urbanized, more exposed to the pressure from the north, where beyond the Rhine and Danube frontiers, the Germanic peoples were moving. Not because they hated Rome. In many ways, they admired it. Many Germanic warriors served in the Roman army. Their leaders wore Roman armor, spoke Latin, dreamed of Roman titles and Roman recognition. But they were moving because something was pushing them. From the east, from the vast steppes of Central Asia, a new force was arriving. The Huns. Fierce nomadic warriors on horseback, moving westward across the grasslands, displacing every people in their path. The Goths, pushed by the Huns, crossed the Danube into Roman territory. The Vandals crossed the Rhine. The Franks. The Burgundians. The Lombards. Not always as invaders, often as refugees, as settlers, as people desperately seeking safety inside Rome's borders. Rome let them in. It had to. It needed their manpower for its armies. It needed their labor for its farms. But absorbing millions of people with different languages, different customs, different loyalties, was more than the weakening Western Empire could manage. The end, when it came, was almost quiet. September 4th, 476 AD. A Roman emperor sat on his throne in Ravenna. The western capital had moved there from Rome decades earlier, for defensive reasons. His name was Romulus Augustulus. Romulus, the name of Rome's founder. Augustus, the name of Rome's greatest emperor. As if history were being deliberately ironic in its final moments. He was a boy. Perhaps 14 or 15 years old. A figurehead, placed on the throne by his father, a general who held the real power. A Germanic chieftain named Odoacer had grown tired of the pretense. He marched on Ravenna with his army. He deposed the boy emperor. He sent the imperial insignia, the purple robes, the diadem, the symbols of Roman power, to the emperor in Constantinople. There is only one emperor, Odoacer said. In the east. There is no need for one here. And that was it. No great battle. No burning of the city. No dramatic last stand on the walls. A boy emperor quietly removed from his throne. A set of robes sent east. And the Western Roman Empire was gone. But was Rome really gone? Stand in any European city today and look around you. The language you speak, whether English or French or Spanish or Portuguese or Italian or Romanian, descended from Latin. The language of Rome. The laws that govern your life, the concepts of innocent until proven guilty, of contract, of property rights, of citizenship, descended from Roman law. The calendar you use, January, February, March, Roman months, named for Roman gods and Roman emperors. The roads that connect your cities often follow the paths that Roman engineers laid down 2,000 years ago. The very idea of a city, with its public spaces, its baths, its markets, its forums, is a Roman idea, so deeply embedded in Western civilization that we no longer even notice it. And the faith that shaped 1,000 years of European history, Christianity, spread along Roman roads, in the Latin language, through the institutional structure of the Roman Church, which modeled itself quite consciously on the Roman Empire it had outlasted. Rome fell. And Rome never fell. It transformed. It dissolved into the cultures that absorbed it. It became the foundation on which everything that came after was built. Every time you read a book, you are using an alphabet that Rome spread across Europe. Every time you enter a courthouse, you are walking into a building shaped by Roman ideas of justice. Every time you look at a calendar, you are counting days in a system Augustus reformed. Rome is not gone. Rome is everywhere. The sun sets over the Palatine Hill one last time tonight. The same hill where Romulus once stood and looked out over a valley of mud and possibility and decided, with the absolute, unreasonable confidence of a young man who does not yet know what is impossible, to build a city there. The same hill where Augustus sat in his simple study in his old age, looking out at the marble city he had built from the brick city he had inherited. The light is the same golden light it has always been. The Tiber still winds through the valley below, as it wound on the day the she-wolf found 2 babies in a basket among the reeds. The 7 hills still rise above the plain. And on those hills, and in the valley between them, and stretching out across the ancient city in every direction, Rome breathes. Not the Rome of emperors and legions. Not the Rome of the Colosseum's roar, but Rome nonetheless. Eternal, as it always called itself. Eternal, as it perhaps truly is. Close your eyes now. Let the golden light fade slowly behind your eyelids. Let the sounds of the ancient city grow distant, the forum's busy murmur, the Senate's passionate debate, the Colosseum's enormous roar, the legion's steady march, the street vendor's morning cry, all of it growing softer, further away, like music carried on a warm Roman wind. You have traveled far tonight. From the she-wolf on the riverbank to the last emperor's quiet surrender. From mud huts on a windy hill to marble temples touching the sky. From a small fierce city on 7 hills to an empire that shaped the world we live in today. Rest now. You have earned it. The eternal city sleeps around you. And we sleep with it. Good night.